This week, Allie Mellen, industry analyst at Forrester Research, will be here to talk about humanizing security operations. Then we welcome Darren Guccione, CEO and co-founder of Keeper Security, to talk about password vaults. Finally, in the enterprise news, iBoss adds features to its cloud platform for visibility and control. SailPoint workflows enable customers to automate tasks with no code. Digital Shadows launches 2 premium services. Praetorian launches an open source security scanner for Golang. Tigera addresses demand for the security of containers and Kubernetes. API Security 101, CVSS scores, and more. Stay tuned for all that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Every 11 seconds, there's a new ransomware attack. Oil pipelines, universities, corporations, all paying millions of dollars. Barracuda says, don't pay the ransom. Before a ransomware attack occurs, train your teams to recognize an attack and use anti-phishing technology. Protect your applications, and they can't get onto your network. Simple backup and restore solutions quickly recover your data without paying the ransom. Build your ransomware protection plan now by visiting securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda. Welcome to episode number 239 of Enterprise Security Weekly for August 18th, 2021. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, joined remotely by Adrian Sanabria. Adrian, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Paul. What's cooking?
A lot of ribs over the weekend we're cooking. Eight racks, too. It was amazing. Tyler Shields is here with us as well.
Hello again, Paul. Hello from the land of the teddy bears.
Yes, I wish you could have all been here to have ribs. We'll have to make a date where everyone comes here and we barbecue.
Sounds good to me.
That works for me.
Everyone in the office was like, hey, you got like leftovers? I'm like, no, there was actually no leftovers. Not one rib survived. Quick announcement, InfoSec World 2021 is proud to announce its keynote lineup for this year's in-person event. Hear from Robert Herjavec, plus heads of security at NFL, TikTok, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Stanford University, and more. Plus, Security Weekly listeners save 20% on your World Pass and main conference registration. Please visit securityweekly.com/ISW 2021 to register today. Allie Mellen supports security and risk professionals covering security infrastructure and operations to assist clients in the building and maturing their threat detection and response strategies. Today, she joins us discussing humanizing security operations. Allie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Yes, nice to have you. Allie, how did you kind of get your start in information security and become an analyst?
Oh, man. So a while ago, I was in college and I was actually in an intro to cybersecurity class. It was the first class that they had on cybersecurity and the only class they had on cybersecurity. And it was very hands-on. We hacked a server for the midterm and hacked and defended a server for the final. And the term project was either to recreate someone's security research or to do our own. And so me and a couple of colleagues opted to do our own security research. We ended up, we were trying to turn the Square reader into a credit card skimmer, and we ended up going a little bit further than that and submitted that research to Black Hat after our professor suggested that we should, and it got accepted. And that was my first experience with the cybersecurity industry, was going to Black Hat, going to Vegas, seeing everything that was going on there, talking to reporters, presenting, and I just fell in love with it immediately.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a great story. That's amazing.
It was a good introduction. I feel like everyone has these weird stories about how they got into security. No one ever has just a straight path.
Yeah, absolutely. What are we talking about today? I know Adrian and Tyler have lots of questions for you as well, so I'll try and share the floor.
Awesome. Yeah, so one of the first things that I did when I came to Forrester and became an analyst was to publish a blog post on humanizing security operations, which I think is very important. a lot of times the buzzwords that go around are about automating away the people, using AI to replace people, which isn't actually true at all. And I think it's misguided and misplaced. And we're kind of selling our talent short, and we're not prioritizing them in the SOC the way that we should be. And so I wanted to not only make a statement as an analyst that I'm not just there to cover the tools, but I'm also there to talk about the people and the processes and to talk about how the SOC works holistically, but also just to highlight that autonomous SOC and AI replacing security operations personnel just isn't a reality and isn't something we should strive for.
It's an interesting balance, and I think it always has been, between technology and people when we talk about how to secure an organization. I think, looking back 20 plus years, I wish I had some of the tools we have today, but I think you're right. They don't replace the humans. They augment. Yeah.
That's one of the things that I really love about security is I feel like it, and kind of the way that I got into security exemplifies this. Like, ultimately, it's about the creativity that you bring to the problems that you're faced with.
Yep.
And that is not replicable. You cannot have an AI build that creativity for you. And so that's what I find so compelling about security is that human to human fight and the way that we have to innovate. We have to think about these problems creatively. And I think that the tools should be aiding that, but they won't be replacing that. And if they do, we're actually in trouble because so far, at least, humans can always outsmart these tools and find ways around them. So we need the humans to back them up in order to handle all of the things that the tool can't.
Yeah. It's interesting. I posted, I was looking at Raspberry Pi projects, and I posted one that someone had built this very elaborate cocktail maker. And those of us that have made cocktails, you could get it from a machine, but the bartender always has their own, to your point, innovation and creativity that I think is what makes cocktails really special. And while it could probably make an okay cocktail, I don't think it's going to catch up to humans anytime soon. And I think we see the same thing in security.
I love that comparison. And part of the fun thing with cocktails is going to a bunch of different bars and trying all the old fashions and seeing how different they are and how bad they are sometimes and good other times.
Wow, we need to hang out more.
Can we go ahead and plan that?
Right.
That's I've never been much of a mixed drink person, and only in the last couple of years have some friends talked me into some of it. And Manhattans and old fashions, that's absolutely where I'm at. But to build on your example, machines can turn out a pretty good cup of espresso or drip coffee.
Yep.
Because, consistency is kind of what you want from that. You don't want creativity. You want it to be pretty much the same every time. You don't want a machine putting its own signature take on, on a shot of espresso or a cup of drip coffee. You want it to be the same everywhere you go. But that's not what we're up against. And most of when I talk to MSSPs and MDR firms, obviously they're highly incentivized to be as efficient as possible, because the more people they have to employ, that eats into their profit margins. And most of them use ML and AI to make their people more efficient. The goal is never to replace them. Does that align with kind of your thinking on the matter, Allie?
Totally. I'm currently writing or researching for a big report on the future of the SOC. What does the future of the SOC mean and look like? And the premise of that is actually that the future of the SOC is meaningless, and it's just something that thought leaders say to kind of bolster themselves up and make themselves look good. But ultimately, there's no end state that we're trying to reach where everything will be perfect. It is really turning the SOC into an optimization engine. And part of that is something that managed service providers, MDRs, they are way ahead of the curve on that compared to the average SOC, because they literally have to be for their profit margins, just like you were saying. But it offers a really interesting blueprint for how these in-house SOCs need to be thinking about this, because it really should be about not just using machine learning and AI to enable analysts better, although that is really important, but then also measuring and having metrics around analyst productivity in such a way that you can identify well, is this telemetry source really helping or hurting? Is this giving them the context that they need and want, or is it just noise that they don't actually need to have access to? And how can we trim away the fat so that we can actually give them a better experience? So I totally agree. And I think that that parallel to managed detection response, MSSPs, is dead on.
So let me hit you with a quick question and get your feeling on it. Is managed SOC and private SOC kind of like private cloud and public cloud? Like most organizations shouldn't do it. They should just leave it to the experts and not try and build it in-house unless they're just really big and have some really specific needs. It does seem to me like there's just no way you're going to out-innovate in efficiency an external firm that specializes in that, right?
I'd say that it doesn't have to be black and white. Ultimately, what we're seeing constantly more and more is that in lieu of having the SOC all in-house or having it all outsourced, there's some combination, there's some mix. And I think that that is really one of the best ways to handle it. I mean, as any SOC needs an incident response retainer, that going in. And so having someone who is already familiar with the environment, who already understands what's going on, that's definitely better for actually how you are responding more quickly to breaches. Now, inclusive of that, it's also true that there's a huge skills gap. And so those managed service providers can help with that struggle too, is actually being able to get the talent, find the talent, keep the talent. But I think that there's something to be said for having a security team. Sorry, my cats are fighting right behind my computer. Is that necessary, you two? Here's one. Leo. Where's the other? I'm going to get him off. And Luca. Sorry. Perils of working from home. I think that there's something to be said for having some analysts, some SOC manager in-house because they know your environment best. They know what needs to be done. They can help with those optimization efforts. I think more and more we're seeing that having someone in charge of operations, generally operations of the SOC, is really important to coordinate things between the SOC and the larger enterprise, being able to improve the employee experience with people that the rest of your employees know and are familiar with, instead of just getting a Slack message from your managed security services provider. So I think there's something to be said for balance in both sides with it.
Yeah, managing the process, I think, is often underestimated. And I think that ties into, based on what you were just saying, Allie, the cost of a breach. If you don't have a planned incident response that increases your resources when there is an incident, your internal team is doing 100% of that work, which means they're doing the unplanned work, not the planned work. And in that scenario, the more breaches you have, the more insecurities you will have in your program because you're just in response mode all the time and you're not doing the actual security work.
Exactly. Yeah, I really like that framing of it, planned versus unplanned work, because there's so much unplanned work.
Yeah. I stole that from Gene Kim and the various DevOps works, right? I mean, that's how they title it in the book is, unplanned work will kill you. And that actually stemmed from, of course, lean manufacturing and things like that. To be more efficient, you had to get away from unplanned work, and breaches are certainly unplanned work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that a lot of times from the outside, the work of the SOC just gets boiled down to triage, investigate, respond, move on to the next ticket. But there's a lot more things that the SOC has to do and that you have to keep in mind in order to not just maintain the program, but also make it better and make your security coverage better.
It's almost like the SOC is just permanently the "this is fine" meme.
Yes.
Like with the fire all around, the cup of coffee. Like,
everything's fine.
Day-to-day job.
But also, I think it's important in humanizing it as well is, and I'll use the analogy like here at CRA. Obviously, we have a lot of security experts that work here at CRA, and we're like, there's a lot of security knowledge here. But in many organizations, like, who is the point person to coordinate all of these teams? So who's the person who sets the policy, communicates the policy to the board, communicates that policy to the users and is checking in with your MSP, your MSSP, and your internal team to make sure that we're also supporting those same policies and procedures. And I think that's really the job in many as a CISO or security operations person. I think it's more of a CISO, right, that does that level of communications. To me, that's kind of where security begins, is the establishment of those policies and communication.
Yeah, and I think that the problem is that's a lot of work for a C-level executive.
Yes.
A lot of work that they probably shouldn't be doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that we haven't really matured, and we're kind of getting there right now, to the point where the CISO has the deputy CISO or the BISO or someone who does those tasks and then is able to report to the CISO so that they can handle those conversations with the board or the rest of the C-suite. And we need to see that become more standardized so we can better equip CISOs to not want to drink all the time and quit their job.
No, I agree, because I've been toiling with that problem as well. I'm like, that's a lot of work for one person, right? How do you kind of distribute that? How do you deputize people to have certain, essentially what we're talking about is where does the accountability and responsibility fall?
Yeah, I like thinking about this as like, let the type A people in. Mm-hmm. I'm a very type A person. I love to organize things. I love to keep things organized. If something's not organized, my brain is out of sorts. And a lot of times I don't feel like those are the people who necessarily are really driven to become security experts, because many times it's like this free-flowing creative, what happens if I do this, and everything kind of becomes this mess and you find something out of the mess. But we need the type A people to come in and say, oh yeah, I can organize this process for you. I can keep track of all of the initiatives that we have going on. I can make sure that communication with all of these external vendors is consistent. And that's where I think that there's an interesting opportunity for kind of a new role around the operations element of this, and like the project management element.
I agree, because I'm really good at the pundit part of it, right? And just going, well, every account should have two-factor authentication. And like, I can explain to you why that's important and the impact if that's not there, but someone needs to go like communicate that and make sure it's happening all the time within our organization. And that's just one control.
Yeah. And that's one of the things, like, I think of humanizing security operations as going way beyond just raising the importance of the people that are actually working in the SOC. But I think it's also an exercise in employee experience as well for the broader organization. Ultimately, you have these security analysts, incident responders, who are going to end up working with the employees in your organization. And I see a lot of times that this relationship is very frayed. It's very fragmented. It's a lot of the employees feel like, oh, they just come to me when I've done something wrong and I've been a part of a breach, and they just clean up my computer and they run away back to the SOC. And I want us to start thinking about it more as a service to those individuals, and also an opportunity to connect with them on why security is important, what they can do better next time, and just knowing that the SOC is here to help.
So I have a quick question. You touched on a lot of different topics when it comes to improving SOC analyst efficacy, efficiency, capabilities, et cetera. Part of the problem is there's a lot of problems, a lot of things that need to be solved within the SOC when it comes to up-leveling our capabilities. If you had to prioritize them, given your experience, what would be the one bullet you would fire first? What would be the one thing? Is it, education, experience, tooling? What is the one thing that you could say to enterprise, look, if you want to level up your SOC, the first thing you should look at is X?
Oh my God, that's so hard. So I'm inclined to say that the first thing that someone looking to up-level their SOC should do is to make more time for their analysts during the week. I think that there are some managed service providers that are doing something really interesting where they're giving their analysts enough time to explore other facets of security, especially the L1s, giving them time, like even if it's just a couple of hours during the week, to try out threat hunting, try out pen testing, try doing something that is outside of the analyst role, but where they're in their day-to-day analyst function, looking at something and being like, I think I could break that, or I think there's something wrong with that. I think that is the best way to retain talent, because these people are not just triaging alerts. They're also you're giving them the opportunity to learn something more and to explore an area that interests them. That, to me, I think is going to be really important to up-leveling the SOC. It comes with a lot of other challenges, like the fact that you don't have that time to give to them. But that's probably where something like MDR comes into play, and where you have to incorporate either services or more full-time employees, which is just not possible for a lot of companies, but to give them the space to move into that L2, L3. And part of the reason I say this is because at Forrester, we've done a lot of research on this. And one of the things that we find is that there's a lot of people with 0 to 2 years experience. There's a lot of people with 15 plus veteran years of experience, not a lot of people in between. Mm-hmm. And the people in between are really what we need. And part of the problem is, and we're seeing this right now, especially with everything that's happening with all of these, I think they're calling it like the Great Resignation or something. Jeff Pollard was talking about this with our team the other day, the Great Resignation, where everyone is switching jobs. And this is a prime opportunity for L1s who have just learned enough scripting knowledge to say, you know what, security is hard. I'm going to take this scripting knowledge, turn it into a developer role, and just go to a tech company that gives me lots of snacks, and I get to sit in a nice office above ground and make a lot more money. And so I think that the problem that we're having right now is we're not treating the newer analysts with, like, we're not giving them the opportunity to expand their skills the way that we need to keep them in this field.
Yeah, there's so many things you're hitting on there that I want to talk about. I have to be careful, like which rabbit hole we choose to go down. But something we've been talking about like crazy, it seems, over the last couple of weeks here at Security Weekly is this supposed talent gap that we have. That seems to only be like at the middle or the top, and kind of the failure to build these development pipelines, these career development pipelines for people coming into the field. Because I mentor a couple folks, and I've got a few folks that have been looking for their first cybersecurity job, and nobody's hiring. They can't find anything, or it's just so incredibly competitive they can't get in. So there's this whole bottleneck. I think that's right at that entry level field where everybody wants experienced people, and if they're just not willing to spend that money to train people up. And, as part of I'm involved with a lot of local community stuff where I live with cybersecurity. So I know a lot of folks who are at that entry level. They're in their first SOC job, or they're doing a SOC job for an MSSP or something like that. And it's it's interesting. It's it's not encouraging. let's say that. So to kind of center myself here, talking about people development, if you go back and check out Business Security Weekly, not the one from this week, but the one before that, for people listening to this, we had an interview with Jim Routh, and the whole conversation almost was about talent development. I learned that I shouldn't say employee retention, I should say employee development. Because if you're trying to retain someone, you're not really invested in the person.
It sounds pretty close to detaining an employee.
You're invested in keeping a butt in a seat. And we talked about how like it's just not allowed to talk about leaving the company. Like, you can't go to your boss and say, for my career, I'm thinking of leaving, go and do something else. Like, you have to do it all in secret, and then you put in your 2-week notice, and then your manager has to scramble. It's this whole conversation that just doesn't happen in a lot of organizations because the culture doesn't allow it. Because it's like, if they know I'm going to leave, they might just fire me outright or something like that. So,
I think that's another part of the problem with this, is that it is a multifaceted issue. Keeping people in this field, keeping people in these companies is it's a problem on many levels, not just because they're burnt out, not just because they aren't getting compensated the way that they think they should be, or they're having trouble finding a role even. I mean, to take this to add on another dimension to this at Forrester, so we have a big security and risk team to cover a lot of different aspects of security and also risk and privacy. And we have an analyst who, she is dedicated, Janan Budge, she's dedicated to researching toxicity in security culture and how to build security awareness programs that don't have that type of toxicity and all aspects of the culture of security. And there's a reason that we are able to dedicate resources to that. And it's because it's a big problem in this field. And so that is just another layer onto this issue of retaining talent or doing people development. Is, what is your culture like? Is your culture toxic? Because that's going to affect whether people want to be at your company or whether they want to be in the field at all. And it is another factor that helps explain that burnout between 4 and 10 years.
That's amazing to me. Like I'm still processing the fact that you have an analyst dedicated to that. What was her name again?
Janan Budge. She's amazing. She's fantastic. Some of the stories that she tells are horrifying, though.
I bet. I mean, is she a licensed therapist?
No.
I feel like that's part of
my
role,
knowledge.
Right?
No, but she's done some really amazing work in this. She's in Australia, actually. And so I don't get to work with her as much as I want to, but we are working on a couple of joint pieces of research together related to toxicity. She gets questions a lot on toxicity in the SOC and how to really improve the culture in the SOC, which we talk about all the time because it is such a problem. Unfortunately, there is not enough, or there's too much for her to work on in this awful, awful area.
Yeah.
Allie, one of my suggestions and kind of initiatives is to give folks that are in the SOC, let's say, or really any other security role, give them projects, allow them to work on them, but also then have them present and communicate those out to the rest of the team, because that helps everyone in a positive way, right? And they've given someone the opportunity to work on a project that they like. Sometimes those get worked into products. Sometimes those get worked into production. They've learned something. Now they're also communicating their knowledge to the rest of the team as well, improving their communication skills and improving the overall knowledge of the rest of the team. Is that something we need to do more of?
Absolutely. I think that's an awesome point. I think combining that too with making sure that these people have a mentor in whatever field they're exploring. So say threat hunting, if they have one of your senior threat hunters or one of your threat hunters generally as their mentor, who they can go to and say, hey, I tried this and I don't think anything came of it. I don't know what to do now. Having someone who they can talk to about that before they go to present it to the team is incredibly helpful and gives them an opportunity to talk to someone who isn't their direct boss or their peer about the issues that they're facing. So I totally agree. And I think that joint learning is really, really important.
Adrian?
Yeah. So, just shifting a little bit, back to the SOC, as I mentioned, I talked to a bunch of people who are at that lower level of the SOC and just wanted to get interested in your perception of how we're doing, in general, like the industry companies. I very much get the impression that a lot of companies are throwing bodies at it. Like here's a sim, here's a bunch of, beating hearts, pulses, go do something with it. And like, there's not really kind of a plan. There's not really a good workflow in how we're going to find threats and things like that, with these tools. And that's a sense I get, but, of course, at that lower level, I've noticed a lot of people, especially if the culture isn't great, the tendency is to be a bit pessimistic, because they can't see the full picture, and I suspect you probably talk to people more at the top end of that. What does it look like from that end of the funnel?
It varies a lot. there are teams that I'm like, you are way beyond anything I can help you with, to people where I'm like, I think you should talk to 6 other analysts on this team, just so that you're fully prepared with what you're trying to do here. So I think that's part of the problem. And you kind of talked about this earlier. You said, what did you say? You said that there's just so much to do, and there's just so much to do. That really resonates with me, because even reading the existing guidance on how to run a SOC, what your SOC should look like, you read through it and it's like, oh my God, no one should ever do this. This sounds like exhausting and so much work and just completely untenable for the typical security team. And
guaranteed
it's very
burnout.
difficult. Yeah. It's very difficult to find guidance that's like, here's the bare minimum. This is what you should do for the bare minimum. We know that you don't have a lot of people. We know you don't have a lot of resources. Go do this. Versus that middle tier, versus the advanced, and then like the experts who are just at the bleeding edge of the field. So I think that that's where we run into a lot of trouble, is just making sure that the guidance is clear. And again, it comes back to that like organization and just having it in a structured way that's consumable for people, which just comes from this field also still being in its own way weirdly old and yet still really young.
Yeah. I can relate to that. Being old and still young.
Yeah, I was going to say, sounds like Paul.
I don't know. Sometimes I feel just old. Or
Yeah, kids keep you young.
that's true. It's very true. And humble.
Yeah.
Speaking of the next generation of cybersecurity professionals, there's a 2-day camp at the local high school that my oldest was attending today. And my wife and my son gave me explicit instructions not to embarrass him this morning and try and go talk to the teacher and all the students. So I had to be on my best behavior and not embarrass. And my wife actually called me after I dropped him off. She's like, please tell me you didn't embarrass him.
Oh, that's really cute.
I'm like, well, tomorrow I was going to give them all Security Weekly hats. Is that embarrassing? And she's like, please no.
You're just trying to drive up viewership.
That's it. Got to get them while they're young, you know?
So before we end here, I just wanted to just for people that want to dig more into the talent development stuff, just wanted to do a quick shout out for that. The Business Security Weekly episode I was talking about before is number 227. The interview with Jim, I think it's Ruth.
Jim Routh.
Ralph.
Yes.
Ralph.
Yes. Is he still at Aetna, or did he?
No,
he's retired, and he's basically on a bunch of boards and doing the advisory thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, he retired from Aetna. And then yesterday's Security and Compliance Weekly, number 83, with Naomi Buckwalter, she actually started I think it's a nonprofit. And the whole goal of it is to kind of address the hiring problem, getting people into cybersecurity, and getting companies to build that development pipeline for people. So I just thought it was, serendipitous that we've had so many episodes just in the last 2 weeks on this one topic that it was worth pointing those out.
That's awesome.
Well, Allie, thank you so much for appearing on Enterprise Security Weekly.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
With that, we will take a short break and come back with Darren Guccione from Keeper Security. Stick around.